Greetings everyone, and today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite systems, the Super Nintendo. Probably one of the best systems of all time, a lot would say. And I'm going to do my top 10 list today for you guys. Not like my top 10 of like what games I think are like technically great or anything like that. Just like ones that I've played the most and had the most fun with and have like a lot of nostalgia for. I've played a lot of newer Super Nintendo games. Well, not newer. Ones that I've got more recently, but only a couple of these are going to make my list. Most of these games that I'm going to show you today are games that I played back, a little bit after the Super Nintendo came out, and that's what I'll talk about. So anyway, yeah, this is the same exact unit I bought back probably in 1990, I want to say. I don't know. I don't remember exactly when they came out, to be honest, but I remember I had to wait like a couple of years to get it. But once I saw that Super Mario World, man, I had to get that. I had to get the system. And actually, that's not going to be one of the games I'm showing you today, but it is pretty high up there with my favorite games for this system. Now, number 10, I will show you. It might be a surprise to you guys, but it's Pilot Wings. And this was actually one of the first games that came out on the system, I think. And I have really good memories of this game because it might have actually been the first Super Nintendo game I ever saw. And I played it over at my friend Dan's house, I remember, back in middle school, it must have been. And we just had a lot of fun with, parachuting and flying the planes and trying to get like the top scores for everything. And the game is actually not that long if you just speed through it. If you're good at it, you can probably finish it in like an hour tops. But if you don't know how to do all the little exercises that make you run through, it can be a lot of fun learning just what to do. And it's got pretty good mode 7 on it too. So, I mean, a lot of people I've heard kind of joke at this game, but I really like it. It's my number 10 on my top list. So, number 9 is Draken. And this is actually, the same copy I bought when I was a kid. I'm one of those characters that, like, saved a lot of their boxes and stuff when they were growing up. I actually threw a lot away too, though, which I regret now. But this game I held on to because it was the first Nintendo game that kind of felt almost like a PC game to me. And I think it was ported from the PC, and it was just like very serene, and you go around in kind of like a pseudo 3D world. And you get into all kinds of castles, and you're searching for different locations and stuff. And it's a pretty good role-playing game, actually. And it's by Kenco, which is a company that's still around today. They're still making like mobile games for cell phones, I think. But back then they did this one, and I thought the graphics were really interesting in it at the time. Now I don't think the game would probably hold up for most people. I think they'd say like, oh, this game looks kind of primitive, which it is, but it has a lot of nostalgia for me. And this actually might have been one of the earlier games that I got too. So, when you got a new system when you're a little kid, sometimes the first games you get are the ones that leave you with the most memories. That's number 9. Number 8 is Zelda: Link to the Past. And this game I got back when to this. Just so you know, all these games that I show you today, if they're in a box, it's because I've had them, since they were new, since I bought them when I was little. I've never wanted to collect Super Nintendo games and try to find them in the boxes now. I think it's just way too expensive. But, this one is... I mean, everyone's talked this one to death. I probably don't have to tell you too much about it. But I do remember just having wonderful times with this. All the colors in it were just so different from a lot of Super Nintendo's games that you found, and just kind of like the mystery and adventuring and the finding the little items. It just really is a good quality game, and I recommend it for sure. Number 7, Soul Blazer, and this is kind of another action role-playing type of game. Probably more of an action game. You're running around with a little sword and you shooting magic off at the monsters and stuff. And this was kind of like the first game that came out in the Legend of Gaia series. I don't know if that's what it's called, but in the trilogy you got Soul Blazer, and then you got Legend of Gaia, and then we never got it here, but the third one is Terra Enigma. And that one came out in just Europe for some reason. I don't know, maybe they didn't think it was going to sell it here in the US. But yeah, this is the first one. And I don't really think they're not like in a story progression, like you don't have to play this one before you play Legend of Gaia. But I remember this one just having like really clean graphics, really cool music, really good little quests you got to do. And I still play this, now and then. I haven't probably played it for a couple of years, but it still holds up. I definitely recommend this game. And what are we on here? number 6, ActRaiser. And this game was kind of cool too. This is probably like one of the earlier titles I got as well. And in this one, well, I should probably be showing you guys the backs too. You're a god basically, and you go down onto this planet, and your objective is to just thwart evil and rescue all the people of the world. And I mean, the story is not amazing or anything, but for the Super Nintendo, it's kind of cool because you got these action scenes where you're going through like side-scrolling levels and fighting a boss at the end. And they're really top-notch, even though this was an earlier game on the system. And then you got a second part of the game where you're like going around and like building the cities and helping the people fight off the monsters in their cities and stuff like that. And that's kind of like an overhead view. I don't know if you can see it here. But yeah, that is that. Number 5 is Final Fantasy II. And this one, I remember, I never had it originally. I think I had to borrow it from my friend back in the day. But this is a really good Final Fantasy game. The only one I played before this was Final Fantasy on the Nintendo. And for you Final Fantasy fans, you guys know that this actually isn't Final Fantasy II, it's the 4th one in the series. But this is only the second one I ever played because, I never imported or anything like that. And this is a really high quality game. I can't really tell you like too much about it. It's like your typical Final Fantasy game. You're running around, trying to save the world as usual, and doing different quests, and I'd say probably like if you're not a Final Fantasy fan, going back and playing this one today might be a little. I don't know if it would really hold up today, to be honest, because the graphics are very simple. The little characters, they're all like little SD superform characters. And if you have some nostalgia for these things back in the day, I'd recommend getting it. But if you have never played like one of these older Final Fantasy games, I'd probably recommend like the newer ones. I don't know, if it all depends on your tastes, really. If you like the art style and everything, and you don't mind the simple graphics, it's a really good story. And it'll keep you hooked. The game lasts at least like 30 hours too. It's a long one. And number 4, we got Final Fantasy III, of course. So I got this one back in the day too, and this was one of the ones that I had to rebuy this one because back in the day I bought it boxed and everything. I have no idea what happened to my original copy. Just, you know, one of those things where it just disappears, which really bums me out because this is actually a really good game, one of my favorite games on the Super Nintendo. And this one actually is a lot like the fourth one, or Final Fantasy II rather. And the only difference is that they just added a lot of like story elements and just like content in the game. The game is a lot longer, I think, and there's just all kinds of crazy stuff that happens to your characters in it, like throughout the story. And the graphics are pretty similar in terms of just like how the characters look and everything. And the music is also very good. Final Fantasy II had very good music. This one has really good music as well. Excuse me. And yeah, I mean, if same thing with the other one. If you want to go play these old games and you don't mind a little bit of bad graphics, or you know, graphics that you might not think would hold up, I would definitely play it because it's Final Fantasy. We got number 3. Now, I have talked about this game before. This is probably the scariest game on the Super Nintendo. And I had actually never played this when I was a kid. I really wish I had. I actually bought this game probably about, I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, and played it for the first time then. But even then, this game really holds up. I was still blown away by this game. Just because it's like so sci-fi and haunting at the same time that I can't even imagine what people would have thought of it, you know, back when it was new and it came out, and they, you know, it didn't have these kind of, you know, really scary games that we have now. You know, I can just imagine myself if I had gotten this when I was a kid, just, you know, turning off all the lights and just running through it and being scared to death. I think I would have just had a blast with this back in the day. But even today, I would consider it, you know, one of my top Super Nintendo games, number 3 for sure. Now, number 2 is another role-playing game. You might see where, you know, my interests lie in the Super Nintendo. We got Secret of Mana. And this one, I remember buying this when I was a kid. Actually, this is probably like one of the only games that I remember actually going to the store, Toys R Us, and saving money and buying it with my own money. And I still have, you know, the box and everything's in super good shape. It's complete with the manual and everything. And the reason I think I kept this so clean is because I remember even back then, you know, in '95 or whenever this came out. When this came out, let's see. '93. And I remember this game was $80 at Toys R Us. And I didn't even really know much about it. You know, I didn't have any videos to watch on it back then, of course. So I just kind of looked at it. I saw it was a Squaresoft game, and it had a really cool box art. And I said, well, you know, if this game's $80, it must be pretty damn good. So I saved up for it and I bought it. And I was glad I did it. It really is a high-quality Super Nintendo game. The colors are vibrant. The sound is wonderful. And what's really interesting about this game is you can actually go through it with 2 players. It's kind of like another role-playing action-adventure game where you're going through a story, trying to save the world, of course. And it's more like a fantasy game rather than like a dungeon crawling game. But the amount of work they put in this game back then, it is just staggering. And like I said, you can play with 2 players and just go through the whole game, actually fighting like with both your different characters on the screen at the same time, and going through the story, you know, and it was just really interesting. So I definitely recommend this one. I haven't played this one for quite a few years, actually. It's probably been at least 10 years since I played this last. But just, this game is total nostalgia for me. I remember playing it with my brother back in the day, and just having a ball with it. Highly recommend it. Number 2 on my list. And you guys might be able to tell what number 1 is just from the rest of my list. But number 1 is Chrono Trigger. And this is another one that I remember buying at the store too. I don't remember how much I paid for it actually. The Secret of Mana, I remember, was really expensive. I don't remember if this one was the same price as the other ones or if this was kind of like a premium game as well. But you know, like Secret of Mana, I didn't know anything about it. I just saw Squaresoft. I saw you know, some kind of weird characters on the front. Actually, the characters on the front I didn't think were really that appealing at the time. But I got this game, and this is definitely the best game overall in the Super Nintendo, I'd say. Just in terms of like enjoyment factor, because the story that you go through is just epic. You know, I'd say it's more of like a turn-based role-playing game than an action role-playing game. Although there is a lot of action elements in it, like you can run through the areas and you can just avoid the monsters if you want. It's not like Final Fantasy where, you know, you're just walking around and like randomly you'll get in a battle, which I always thought was one of Final Fantasy's weaker points, but you know, that's just how they were. But anyway, this game is probably about 30 hours long just by itself, but the interesting thing, what they did, I've never seen this with any other game. There's about, I forget what the number is, but it's just a huge amount of different endings and different, you know, paths you can take through the game, and they all kind of have to do with like time travel, which is why it's called Chrono Trigger. And yeah, I think there's at least like 6 different endings you can do, and I remember back in the day going through all the different possible scenarios. I think I had some kind of guide at the end of it. I must have had some kind of guide, like kind of helping me out, because it is tricky. If you're just going through it all by your own, I mean, you really got to invest a lot of time in this game to to really enjoy it fully, which I probably actually couldn't do today. Just you know, because I'm old now. I don't have that much time. But this is definitely like one of my most cherished games. Partly because I've had it forever and it's my favorite, and also because I've just noticed the price on this game is ridiculous lately, and so I'm just holding on to this game. I'm never going to sell it. You know, I'm going to keep this game forever. And actually, like, got mad at my wife when we first met. I had, you know, some Super Nintendo games. I was packing up to move here to Arizona from California, and I had them in a bag. And she starts, you know, bringing stuff out to the car, and she just like starts throwing tools on top of my games. I'm like, no, don't do that. That game is like super expensive, and I kind of freaked out. And at that day, she learned, you know, don't mess with the games because they're kind of costly hobby these days, especially Super Nintendo. So anyway, that's all I want to talk about today. Is my top 10. Hope you guys enjoyed. And if you don't have a Super Nintendo, I would recommend you get one. See you later.